Watch this.
It's been a stressful week to a certain extent, but an exciting week.
It's always exciting when you find a new and prestigious place to call home. The Pac-12 was on life support, but Boise State could be one of the schools keeping it alive.
Fully commit. You can't second guess. You got to fully embrace Joe Vandal.
With all the Bronco breaking news, it's a perfect day to talk about, I don't know, the Vandals? We're taking a look back at the beginning of one of the most unique mascots in collegiate sports. Like the arcade games that have become their calling card, the Spacebar in downtown Boise is now a thing of the past. They closed their doors last Sunday, and we're finding out why.
We always knew that this was a potential opportunity. It obviously started escalating, over the last few weeks.
And made official over the last few hours, well, within the last 24. If you haven't heard by now, this morning, Boise State, Colorado State, Fresno State, and San Diego State, formerly of the Mountain West Conference, they announced they're joining the Pac-12 conference starting July 1st of 2026. Although I don't know why they don't just change it back to the Pac-10, even though there are now only 6 teams in the there's a lot going on there. It's been a dream for Bronco fans, by the way, for decades to be a part of this conference, and now it's happening. Granted, the predominant conference on the Pacific Coast is a mere mirage of what it once was, but for Boise State to call themselves members of the Pac-12, outside of wrestling all those years ago, it certainly is an accomplishment. It'll be more of an accomplishment once they wrangle 2 more teams to make the Pac-12 a full 8. To make it, well, a recognizable conference by the NCAA. But as Joe Paris explains, the Broncos have had to chart a course through several conferences to be considered Pac-worthy.
Today, Boise State is Idaho's largest university, with about 20,000 undergrads. But back in 1932, where it all began, the university wasn't even a university. Rather, it was a 2-year junior college. But that didn't stop them from jumping into the world of athletics. Boise Junior College's football and basketball team started the same year the junior college was found. Also, the same year that students picked the Bronco to be the mascot because of the wild horses in the Owyhees. At that point, Boise State was competing as an independent. In 1940, Boise Junior College joined the Intermountain Junior College Conference. That only lasted a year. The Broncos went back to being an independent for 6 years until they went back again to the Intermountain Junior College Conference, and they did that until 1967. Backing up 2 years, though, real quickly to 1965, that's when Boise Junior College became a 4-year college and changed its name to Boise College. 1968 is when Boise College's National Association of Intercollegiate Athletics membership began. You may know it as NAIA. 1 year later, Boise College joined the state university system, adding state to their name to become Boise State College. In 1970, Boise State transferred up, becoming a Division I athletics program. They joined the National Collegiate Athletic Association, aka the NCAA, and in 1974, they officially started going by Boise State University. Now the fun begins. Boise State started its Division I dance in the Big Sky Conference and stayed there for 25 years, winning their first NCAA national championship in 1980 with a 31-29 victory over Eastern Kentucky, and turning the turf blue. That happened in 1986. Fast forward to the 90s. Let's hit 96. The Broncos entered their Big West era, but only for 4 years until they joined the Western Athletic Conference, the WAC. That was in 2001. The conference they would play in and win the iconic Fiesta Bowl in 2007 with the Statue of Liberty play. The Western Athletic era lasted until 2011, when Boise State joined the conference we now know, the Mountain West, who they essentially stayed true to until this week. But we do have to mention the moment the Broncos flirted with the Big East when they were introduced as members for the 2013 season. But the Mountain West wooed them back with a better bid, and the Big East were kicked to the curb of the party in 2012. It was the Mountain West all the way, though, until this week. That's when it was announced Boise State is running to go join the Pac-12 for the 2026 season.
And obviously joining the Pac-12 is a big deal for the state's predominant school for collegiate sports. But what about the other original land-grant university in Idaho? You know, the one to the north that is actually a state? There was a time when the University of Idaho was a member of the marquee Pacific Athletic Conference, but back then it was known as the Pacific Coast Conference, and the Vandals called that place home for more than 30 years. Obviously, the U of I has slipped in standing since then when it comes to the conference they play in, but the Vandal football team is currently riding a wave of resurgence. The playoff wins from last season, the big win against Wyoming last week, the first time they've done that in more than 100 years, and there's a lot to celebrate this month in Moscow. Joe Vandal, the U of I mascot, turns 68 on September 22nd. So where did he come from? Well, we know the fight song says from a tribe in the north, but really, they are the only one of their kind in college sports. Why Vandals? Why Joe Vandal? Hunter Funk, who knows a thing or two about the U of I, has the answers.
My name is Tyler Bennett.
I'm Harrison.
I'm Carson Stauffer.
I was Joe Vandal.
Joe Vandal.
Joe Vandal from 2011 to 2012.
2011 to 2013.
2018 to 2019.
Ask any former Joe Vandal, and you'll know that Joe is an icon.
Who doesn't want to be the mascot? Joe seemed like a superhero to me, going to all the football games and having everyone excited to see him.
It meant being able to represent our college.
I mean, Joe's the mascot. He's a face for everyone to rally behind and kind of unite.
And to uphold that honor,
Joe takes a lot of personality, a lot of over-exaggeration, a lot of hard work.
Really, you got to do a good job of getting the engagement of the crowd.
No dance lessons.
No dance lessons. Although admittedly, I was an okay dancer already.
but ask most Vandals about where Joe Vandal came from.
That is a fantastic question. I have no idea where the Vandal persona or the mascot even came from.
I don't actually know why he's called Joe Vandal. They didn't teach me that.
I can't say, I guess. Yeah, I've always seen him as a Viking. I don't know that history.
Not even the people who embodied Joe Vandal knew. So, like a good student, we headed straight to the library.
I'm a historian.
Our expert, Dulcie Kirsting-Lark.
So I'm going to start from the beginning. So, you know, the university is seated at Moscow in 1889. We're kind of opening our doors in the early 1890s. And we've got students involved in athletics pretty much from the start.
Sports like football, basketball, even a women's rifle team.
But there really wasn't a name for the student athletes.
It took almost 30 years to find.
It all comes back to the 1918 basketball team. There's this sort of genius student journalist working for the Argonaut, which is our student newspaper. His name was Lloyd Jazz McCarty, and he had a flair for words.
Look him up, and she's right. The team played with such intensity. Sports writers would say they vandalized their opponents. During the 1917 football season, Jazz used the term wrecking crew to describe the athletes. December 4th, 1917, he says, the wrecking crew sure did bring home the bacon. December 11th, the grenade-throwing artist of the 1917 wrecking crew has gone to the waiting arms of Uncle Sam. Now, eventually that term turned into Vandals. January 8th, 1918, he said, the present gang of Vandals have the best material that's ever carried the eye into action. And it stuck.
This young student journalist, Jazz McCarty, kind of single-handedly creates the Vandal moniker that we are now using more than 100 years later.
Fast forward a few years.
So this is the baby Joe.
Oh, wow.
You can see why maybe he didn't have enduring staying power.
Not very feisty looking, yeah.
That's the first artist rendering of the Vandal. By the 1940s,
we get this sort of classical looking Vandal.
In the 1950s, that's where the name Joe evolved and began to take a more similar shape to what we know now.
This papier-mâché head was created in 1956 by Bill Curry, who was the head yeller at the time, sort of encouraging students to cheer at games. So Bill and his mom papier-mâché this Vandal head and convinced somebody to wear it with, sort of the loincloth situation. And Joe Vandal was born.
The university recognizes Joe Vandal's birthday as September 22nd, 1956. She says Joe has had a mix of aging with an eye droop and some plastic surgery with a facelift, but he's always been accepted by his fans. Well, that was until Blow Up Joe came around for 1 year in 2001, and that didn't go so well.
Yeah, not a fan favorite, and so he was retired pretty quickly.
But why the name Joe specifically?
Some students started calling him Joe, as students have a want to do, to name things, and it's stuck.
The rest is history. And you'll be able to find former Joe Vandals everywhere, even here in the heart of Bronco Nation, remaining brave and bold with their Vandal pride.
I do have Joe tatted on my shoulder as well, so I love it.
You have to embody it. That's the secret, is you have to be Joe Vandal.
And I love Joe Vandal, and all the performances I've seen from other Joes have been spectacular. So go Vandals.
Okay, to give some of these former Joe Vandals some grace, I, as a Vandal myself, also on the Spirit Squad, did not know the history of the mascot.
How do they not teach that day one?
You know, I've learned from other Vandals at the station here that if you take the campus tour, they give you that, but I didn't get the campus tour. I just took the college as my own and ran into it. So, but they also talked about switching the mascot name, the Gem Staters, maybe the Potatoes, but those didn't stick.
I was reading some of that history. They also were considering like the Heckites, because Heck Edmondson, the basketball coach, that was what Jazz also referred to them as. But they had all these examples out there. They had the Cougars, they had the Ducks, the Buffalo. Why did not?
See, okay, so historians say the legendary sports writer Jazz was arguing with his colleagues over whether Vandals was the best name, and they really insisted that glorifying animals like rivals was a reflection of, quote, primitive thought, and that they shouldn't stoop that low like our rivals.
Weird.
So, yeah.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. No animals, because, well, I mean, we're going to dive into this a little bit more, because there is an animal connection to this. University of Idaho fielded their first football team in 1893, as we mentioned, without a nickname, much less a mascot. As we just learned, the Vandals arrived in 1917, and that became their sanctioned sobriquet in 1921. But the first mascot, not Joe Vandal, that didn't come along until 2 years later. It wasn't the vision of a Viking you might expect, though. It was a Great Dane named Empire. He was named, or elected, as they said, to lead the tribe from the north in 1923. He came from the Payette farm of Colonel Leroy Vernon Patch. At just 8 months old, he was sent north with Colonel Patch's son, was a senior at the U of I. Empire would call the Kappa Sigma house home for the season, and the idea was Empire would show up on the sidelines wearing his tailored red and gold cape. Don't know why it's red and gold, but it was. And he would inspire the viciousness of the Vandal athletes, quote unquote. That fall and winter, he surely did. The team went undefeated in its first 6 games, but when the season ended, there wasn't much more to do in Moscow for a 175-pound Great Dane, except, well, frighten the townsfolk. So the chief of police suggested Empire be sent home to Payette in March of 24. A few months later, Empire went missing from the Patch place. They even took out an ad in the paper, in the Payette Enterprise, offering a reward for the dog. But he was never found. And Empire's reign, well, it was over. Just 9 months as a mascot. Gone, but not forgotten. There was speculation at the time Empire was stolen by an opposing team. School paper even made that assertion, but no evidence ever surfaced to prove that. Was he missed in the fall of 1924 when the football team took the field again? Well, sure, but the team ended up with the same 5-2-1 record as the year before when Empire commanded the Vandal sidelines. As we just learned, too, it would be another 30 years before the next mascot, Joe Vandal, landed from the north. Sounds like a good time to grab a beverage and maybe play some pinball. Well, apparently not enough people thought that way, because the supernatural Spacebar is now permanently closed. They say it's because of what people were not drinking. All right, we're looking for your thoughts on the Broncos or the Vandals or even arcade games. Text us at 208-321-5614. Always include your name and the hashtag the208. Oh, one more thing. We want to know what superstitions you believe in so we can maybe share them with you tomorrow on Friday the 13th. You know, we've spent a bit of time here on the 208 talking about Idaho's laws and their consequences. Idaho's near total abortion ban comes to mind, with pregnant women having to seek health care out of state and doctors moving out of state as well for fear of offering such care, and then that could put them in prison. In 2023, Idaho passed a law that limits the number of times a liquor license can be sold and transferred. The Spacebar in Boise, which for the past dozen years has been known for its classic arcade games and neon signs, well, they're now dealing with the consequences of that law. Since moving into a new location just before the end of that 2023 legislative session, the owners leased a liquor license from a third party, but that lease expired back in January, and that law kept them from renewing it. Spacebar owners say they've been trying to stay afloat without the license, but the loss in liquor revenue made it difficult to keep up with rent and salaries, forcing owners to declare game over for good last weekend. Aspen Shumpert stopped by the now quiet and slightly darker bar today.
I was going to keep on running and pushing and doing, and time ran out.
After 8 months of feeling knocked around, Spacebar Arcade hit a glitch.
The liquor license was helping us dig out of the debt that we were in and helping us pay all the bills and starting to get some momentum going back into the business.
After losing their lease on a liquor license in January, they say momentum was lost, and so were their sales.
We were digging with the shovel, and then when we lost that, we were digging with the spoon.
Fewer people coming in.
We see a group of people, 4 or 5 people come in, 4 people say beer and wine's fine, 1 person wants spirits, and they leave.
Made it hard to level up.
We see people come in, take pictures, and they leave because we don't have what that they're after, which is available in a lot of the other downtown establishments.
He says not an even playing field with their competitors.
We're not able to operate with that tool, and so yes, it puts us at an unfair advantage.
After struggling to make rent a few times, the building owner called game over.
That has been tough to process and to deal with because we weren't done.
No liquor license, a new location, and turnover in neighbors.
Building looks dead from the outside.
All played a role, but not from a lack of effort.
I have a young daughter. I've given up a lot of time with her to make sure that this makes it to the other side. I've put in a lot of money, a lot of time.
Now Hay and his team can only look back on the memories that count.
This was something special to them and to the community, and that they are going to miss it greatly. And so, that fills my cup.
They'll be fully moved out by the end of this month. Hay said everything inside, including the lights, signs, and classic games, might go into storage or possibly be sold in an auction, but he hasn't decided that yet.
Okay, so when the bar posted on social media that they were closing, a lot of people decided to put in some comments that necessarily weren't related to the bar itself, or I should say the operation of the bar.
Right.
But there were some comments in there that kind of alleged some nefarious activities.
Yeah, some of those comments allege that there was sexual harassment going on by the owner, also by a former employee. And so I did ask him about those allegations. The owner, Hay, denied all sexual harassment allegations against himself, but he did apologize for sexual harassment allegations against his former employee, which he only found out about those through these comments on Facebook when the business was closing and people were, chiming in. He said, "I was shocked and I was hurt and I was apologetic to those people that would have happened under my watch and that would have happened in our bar, because that's not what we are about in this bar, and it was a huge mistake that I had hired that person."
It's just unfortunate that that's how he found out, was through social media comments, as opposed to either of those, well, at least some of those parties bringing them forward to him.
Right, and when we're talking about a business closing and, there's a lot of things going on here.
Yeah.
On top of that, hearing that some people didn't want to be in that bar because of these allegations is a lot to hear.
Yeah, all right. Thank you very much, Aspen. Check your calendars. Tomorrow is Friday the 13th. So if you believe in superstitious things, you might want to be aware. Knocking on wood, tossing salt over your shoulder, opening an umbrella only outside. We want to know what superstitions you believe in. Text them to us, 208-321-5614. Include your name and the hashtag #the208. Well, Joe Vandal's birthday isn't the only news to share out of Moscow today. The trial for a man accused of murdering 4 University of Idaho students, that's coming to Boise. Morgan Romero has details on that move and more. 208 tidbits in today's 411.
The trial for the man accused of killing 4 University of Idaho students in 2022 will now be in Boise. Today, the Idaho Supreme Court signed documents to move Brian Koberger's trial next summer from Latah County to Ada County. 2 people are recovering from severe burns after a gas station exploded last night in north central Idaho. The Clearwater County Sheriff's Office believes more victims were inside the Cardiff, Idaho gas station at the time. We still don't know what caused the explosion.
We are going to run again in November. The needs are still there.
It's official. Canyon County Emergency Medical Services levy will be back on the November 5th ballot. The last $8 million levy didn't pass in the May primary. But this time around, they're asking for just under $6 million to build a new station in South Caldwell, rebuild a station in South Nampa, add an ambulance, and add 7 paramedics to improve competitive wages and reduce response times. This levy would increase property taxes by about $15 per 100,000 of assessed value, which is more than $6 less than May's proposed levy. If passed with a 2/3 majority, this levy would go into effect in 2026. That's the 411 on the 208. I'm Morgan Romero.
I've got a couple questions today about Idaho's liquor license laws, especially the one recently passed in 2023. But this one, I wonder why there is a legal limit to the number of times a liquor license can be transferred. We talked about this when it happened because if you could just sell it and transfer it, well, there's a waiting list for people to get new ones, and you can only have one per every 1,500 people in a population. So there's a limited number you can have. So if you're just constantly selling it, well, it's just going to go to the highest bidder, and those people on the waiting list, They got to wait forever to get a chance at a liquor license. In another case, the Idaho State University mascot was originally a Banty rooster, which is a fighting rooster, I think. Eventually, the football coach Hutchinson from Princeton changed it to the tiger, which actually is the Bengal tiger, more specifically. That is from Savvy and Eagle. That is true. That is true. How about the history of the Orofino Maniacs mascot? Not what most people think, says Bonnie Meridian. No, because Orofino used to be home to a mental hospital, and a lot of people think it came from that. But it came from a write-up in a paper because I guess the team played like a bunch of maniacs is how that one goes. That's the story behind that one. Well, that's all we have time for today. I'll get to another for tomorrow. Your Superstitions on Friday the 13th. We'll see you then.